good morning once again, and good afternoon to everyone in this session. My name is Juan Mavo-Navaro, Assistant Dean Lifelong Learning and Innovation at the School of Continuing Studies, and I would like to give you a warm welcome to our panel, Career Pathways in the Royal Canadian Navy. Before we get started, I wanted to share a few tips for running this session in the most efficient and more beneficial way. If you have any questions during the presentation, please make sure you put them in the chat box. We will gather them and try to address as many as possible after the presentation. This session is being recorded. The recording will be hosted in our Blueprint Career Services portal, and we will provide a follow-up email with details on how to get there. If you have audio issues, please check the audio settings in the Zoom app or in your browser. And please ensure your system volume is up. And finally, microphones and cameras have been disabled. This is done to optimize the webinar experience for all attendees. Before we start, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. For me, reflecting on Indigenous issues is an essential step towards understanding and addressing the deep-rooted challenges faced by Indigenous communities in our country. For me, it's a reminder of the historical injustices, cultural elimination, and ongoing struggles that these communities endure. I am committed to acknowledging and learning their unique perspectives and supporting their rights so we can work towards a more equitable and a more inclusive future where Indigenous people can thrive with dignity and with respect. Before we start our webinar, I would like to go with a round of introductions so you know who else is in this room. You already heard about me. I work at the School of Continuing Studies in the Lifelong Learning and Innovation portfolio. I will pass it to my colleague, Peggy Zhu.
Thank you, Juan. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Peggy Zhu. I'm the manager of the Comparative Education Service of the University of Toronto School of Continuing Studies. Our office actually provides educational credential assessment reports for internationally educated professionals. I'll pass it on to Ann.
Thanks, Peggy. Hi, everyone. My name is Ann Park, and I'm the career strategist here at Blueprint Career Services. And I am so happy to be here to let you know about what we do, but more importantly, about all of the amazing opportunities that the Royal Canadian Navy has to offer. So thank you for being here, and thank you for having us today.
Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Juan. Morning, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Commander Chris Elliot. I'm with the Royal Canadian Navy. I am a naval reservist in full-time with the Royal Canadian Navy Strategic Outreach Team. With that, I also live in Windsor, Ontario, and I'm responsible for the Naval Reserve Division in Windsor, Ontario, HMCS Hunter. And I'll pass the mic to Robin.
Good day, everyone. My name is Lieutenant Navy Rob Austin. I am the detachment commander at the Canadian Forces Recruiting Center in Oshawa, Ontario. I joined the Air Reserve way back in April of 1989, and I then switched to the Navy in 1994. First as administrative clerk, and then I reclassified to what was then known as Maritime Subsurface Officer, which is now Naval Warfare. I've deployed to the south of Latin America down to the tip of Chile. I've sailed in the middle and southern sections of the Arabian Gulf during Operation Apollo, which was Canada's contribution to the war on terrorism. I've done counter-narcotics operations in the Eastern Pacific, and as well as also doing domestic operations such as responding to flooding of the Red, the Fraser, and the St. John rivers, restoring services to Halifax after Hurricane Juan, and a whole bunch of different things throughout my 35 years of, or almost 35 years of service. And thank you very much for having me today to answer questions on recruiting.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you for being here. And thank you, Chris, as well, and the team for the School of Continuing Studies. So moving in our day today, this is the agenda that we'll cover. The agenda is essentially split into two very distinct sessions. We are going to be talking about the University of Toronto School of Continuing Studies, and particularly how the role that we play in the ecosystem at the University of Toronto. We are going to be talking about comparative education services, and we are going to be talking about Blueprint career services. And then we will start the section to talk about the Royal Canadian Navy career opportunities, application process, and the Naval Experience Program. And then we are going to go through a series of questions and answers. Once again, if you have any questions during the session, please put them in the chat. We are going to gather them and we are going to moderate them when we go to the specific section of this panel. So I have the pleasure of starting this conversation to talk about the School of Continuing Studies. We are part of the University of Toronto. We are the non-credit, non-degree division of the University of Toronto. And we are more than continuing studies. For that reason, we are promoting this principle that we are the lifelong learning division of the University of Toronto. We offer more than courses and certificates. Yes, we have those. We have 800 courses and over 100 certificate programs. And I would say more than half of those are offered in an online option, but we also have in-person courses. And our courses and certificates are offered in 12 program areas and more than 40 program streams. And most of the public know about the School of Continuing Studies because of our courses. But we also have educational credential assessments, and I am not going to steal Peggy's thunder by explaining what I mean about educational credential assessments. I'm just going to mention that is a critical tool to ensure the success of internationally educated professionals in Canada and wherever they decide to immigrate. We offer micro courses and micro credentials, which are not accelerated versions of our courses. They are focused on very discrete sets of competencies and skills. And the idea is to provide a very short track of upskilling, reskilling for individuals who are looking for career progression, or they want to pivot, or they want to explore a particular area. And we also offer career services. Our career services are focused on career transition. Once again, those audiences that I just mentioned, we have individuals who are exploring their perspectives, individuals who, for instance, have been displaced in the labor market, individuals who are looking forward to pivoting to different areas. Those are individuals in career transition, and particularly newcomers to Canada are individuals in career transition that could benefit from our career services. We also offer English language learning for participants, both to develop proficiency in the language, as well as to provide them with the prerequisites for admission at the University of Toronto. We offer custom programs to private organizations, nonprofit organizations, and government agencies. We leverage all those courses and certificates that we have, and we customize them, tailor them to the needs of organizational clients. We also offer boot camps in fintech, data science, cybersecurity, marketing, extended reality, which is a term that involves augmented reality and virtual reality, which are experiences that are focused on developing skills from zero, what we call from zero to hero. Well, as an educator, I don't believe that anybody starts from zero. We all starts with some experiences, with some knowledge, rather basic, but we start from a point. But these experiences that we call boot camps are designed precisely to develop those skills to a level where we can use them to attain employment. It's not on the slide, but the School of Continuing Studies also offers post-secondary education preparedness courses designed to ensure that a person can do a transition into post-secondary education and be fully equipped for success. And finally, we offer international programs. Once again, leveraging what we have at the school, we go out of our outside our frontiers, and we offer those programs to our learners wherever they are. So that is the School of Continuing Studies in a nutshell. Once again, we are non-credit, non-degree. The most interesting part of the School of Continuing Studies is that we are open. We don't have an admission process. Whoever wants to take one of these components or services or programs that we are offering, they can take it. Essentially, they just need to register. If there are individuals that are experiencing, for instance, financial need, we have financial aid options that we can offer to them. And before transitioning to the next speaker, I just wanted to mention once again that the school has this focus on lifelong learning. It is an ongoing journey. And this goes on this idea that we are always learning. There is not one and done when it comes to learning. We are learning from every single one of our experiences, and every time we are meeting changes, we need to learn. We need to relearn. We need to upskill. We need to reskill. And as we are moving in this journey, we found partners in this ecosystem that we call lifelong learning that share a similar vision. And we found that case in the Canadian Armed Forces, and particularly in the Royal Canadian Navy. We see clearly that this is an institution that is focused on lifelong learning, on bringing opportunities for individuals to learn about something different that will align with their career prospects and will help improve life circumstances and challenge their minds and improve their knowledge, and at the same time serve our country. So this is an ecosystem of growth and opportunity, and we are really, really grateful to have the Royal Canadian Navy joining us in this learning opportunity that we are seeing today, to speak about what we can do as residents of this country to support to defend our country. So with that, I will pass it to my colleague, Peggy Zhu. She's going to speak about comparative education services.
Thank you, Juan. Once again, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. At this point, you might have a question: why a university offers a service to recognize international degrees? I'd like to tell you a story happened in 1967. That was when Canada saw the first wave of immigrants from long Western countries. Many newcomers found their employers in Canada didn't fully appreciate their education in their home country. They then thought a university degree at one of the best universities in Canada might be helpful, and came to the admissions office of the University of Toronto to get information on application process. But what they really needed back then, and even now, was not to spend 4 years getting a Canadian degree. Rather, they needed a credible organization that tells them the value, or commonly we know as Canadian equivalency, of their international degrees. As a result, CES was established by the university as a first credential assessment agency in Canada to fulfill that mission. And until today, it is still the only university-based assessment agency in Canada. For over 56 years, we have supported internationally educated professionals gaining meaningful employment, obtaining professional certifications, and advancing their education in Canada. Since 2013, as a Canadian government designated educational credential assessment report provider, we have also supported thousands of internationally educated professionals to immigrate to Canada. By recognizing the international educated professionals' academic achievement, we serve as a gateway to the lifelong learning ecosystem of the University of Toronto. Beyond assessing educational credentials, we also open doors to continuous learning opportunities within one of Canada's top institutions. To encourage the professional upgrading, we do offer our applicants a one-time voucher of $200 that can be used to be applied to one of the courses offered by the School of Continuing Studies at the University of Toronto. This is just not an assessment we offer. It is also a pathway to further enhance internationally educated professionals and your skills and knowledge. Next slide, please. How do we support your career pathway then? Our service does not mean it's to assess your degree. We actually provide an expert opinion on your educational credentials. Our process is driven by 3 core principles: authenticity, recognition, and equivalency. We understand the importance of your academic journey, and our assessments reflect a commitment to these key values. Our reports go beyond just a mere overview. We actually provide a detailed analysis, offering insights into the general academic level in Canadian standards through a document-by-document assessment. Additionally, we also break down subjects and grades with the course-by-course analysis, ensuring a comprehensive understanding of your educational background. We do understand that the assessment process can be intricate and communication is crucial. This is why we also provide in-house communication support to guide you through every step of the process. Our dedicated communication team is here to also answer your questions and ensure a smooth experience. In our opinion, communication is not just words, it's about understanding. Our department actually has a very diverse team that speaks more than 10 different languages. Our team's inclusivity ensures that your unique needs, our applicants' unique needs and perspectives are not just heard, but also truly understood. Inclusivity and innovation is at the core of CES assessment policy. We believe in recognizing the diversity of educational systems globally. Our approach is not just about comparison, it is about finding equivalencies and ensuring that your educational achievement process, assessment process is extremely important to remove the barriers and increase all of your international educated professionals' access to a meaningful career, like the Royal Canadian Navy's one-year Naval Experience Program. On that note, I'd like to pass on to my colleague Ann Park to elaborate on the unique career services that we offer that will help you explore career transition and also how the Royal Canadian Navy is an excellent fit. Over to you, Ann.
Thank you, Peggy. Hi, everyone. My name is Ann Park, as I introduced myself earlier, and I am the career strategist here with Blueprint Career Services. My colleague Juan Mavo-Navaro briefly introduced what we do, and I'm going to explain a little bit more in detail about the services that we can provide to folks who register with us. So Blueprint Career Services is been offered for about a year now, and it was developed in response to the needs of our learners. Most of our learners come to us because they'd like to upgrade their careers or they'd like to transition into new careers. And so really that's the foundation of the work that we do. And the services that we provide here at Blueprint Career Services, they're based on helping people to recognize their strengths and develop specific plans to achieve their goals. We don't help with resumes, cover letters, we don't help with job search, but instead we really work with individuals to help them to move forward with their career during a transition or as they hope to move up in their careers. Our offerings are free of charge, and some are fee-based learning opportunities. The offerings that we provide include Real Talk and Industry Insights panels. The Real Talk panels give us the opportunity to invite speakers to speak about topics that are relevant to job seekers, such as dealing with gaps in your resume, ageism in the workplace, networking. And so our Real Talk panels are offered online. They're completely free. They're at lunchtime. So participants really have an opportunity to learn about these amazing topics and how they can help you. And it's a great networking opportunity as well. Similar to Real Talk, we also offer Industry Insights panels where we choose in-demand careers and we invite speakers who are experts on these particular industries to talk about their experiences working in specific industries. Some of the Real Talk panels that we've had in the past include the banking industry and IT, just very in-demand industries, government, of course. And this really gives participants a chance to find out what it's actually like to work in these in-demand industry. And again, at the end, participants have the opportunity to network with our speakers. We also offer the amazing Clifton Strengths workshop, which includes an assessment, a 3-hour workshop, as well as a one-on-one Clifton Strengths coaching session with me. And with this workshop, it allows participants to complete the assessment, which identifies their top 5 strengths, and then we discuss ways how they can use their strengths to elevate their career and network and market themselves to potential employers and as they have interviews. Next, we have something called the Career Wayfinding Series workshops. They consist of 3 workshops. They're 3 hours long, and it's based on design your life thinking principles, in which there's a systematic approach to planning your career, which is extremely empowering for folks because a lot of times you feel at the mercy of employers. And last but not least, we have something called Career Nav, which are one-on-one career strategist sessions with me. And so you have the opportunity to sit down with me and we discuss some of the challenges to achieving your career goals, and we help you to achieve those goals. And I provide that one-on-one, really in-depth support. There's no eligibility criteria to access us, our services. You don't have to be a U of T graduate. You don't have to be an alumni. You don't have to be an SCS learner. For more information, contact us at this email address. And for those who are receiving Ontario Works or an ODSP, our services are eligible to be paid for by those funds. So just talk to your caseworker and they can let you know about that. Next slide, please. Briefly, I'd like to talk about why RCN is an excellent fit for those interested in a career transition. And I've had the opportunity to learn all about the amazing opportunities the Royal Canadian Navy has to provide to folks. So one of the great things about the Royal Canadian Navy is that there's a naval, something called a Naval Experience Program, which requires a 1-year commitment. So if you're not sure about this is the right path for you, you can try it out for a year. If it's a good fit, stick around, stay there, or you can move on to something else. Also, the Royal Canadian Navy has a lot of amazing opportunities in terms of employment. So you can work in a lot of different areas. And if you want to transition into another career opportunity within the Navy, there's a lot of room for growth as well. And they pay for staff development and lifelong learning opportunities. So it's a really great opportunity for those looking to transition into new careers. With that, I have the pleasure of introducing Lieutenant Commander Chris Elliot from the Royal Canadian Navy.
Thank you so much for that excellent introduction, and glad to hear that you've been inspired by some of the ongoing conversations that we've been having over the past year. So as mentioned, I'm Lieutenant Commander Chris Elliot with the Royal Canadian Navy Strategic Outreach Team. One of the things I want to cover today is to let you know why Canada has a Navy and what it does for Canadians. Hoping that in answering these questions, I'll give you a glimpse of what it means to serve as a member of the Royal Canadian Navy. Slide, please. So first and foremost, the Royal Canadian Navy is Canada's fighting force at sea. Governments are responsible for keeping their people, borders, and territories safe and secure. And we've been Canada's fighting force at sea for over 100 years now. Slide, please. And of course, this is no ordinary business. We sail ships and submarines, operate at home and abroad, patrol the world's oceans, and make a difference whenever, wherever, and however we are called upon. Slide, please. And of course, it's no ordinary office, no ordinary view from the office, definitely. Life in the Navy is more than just an office for us. It is our home away from home and fun-loving but hardworking family when we get the chance to go on our ships. Slide, please. So our role is quite large. We protect Canadians, we support our economy, we make the world safer when we work as part of a team in the international community. We increase our global influence, spreading our ethics values, democratic values, and secure our future, and of course, help build our national identity as a maritime nation. Slide. So our primary role is protecting Canadians. We do this by defending sovereignty in our home waters and securing maritime trade routes across the world and in and around North America. Our presence at sea helps Canada thrive. But why do we have to protect Canadians? Slide. Well, during the Second World War, there were 23 ships sunk in Canadian waters. So that was a threat from the German U-boats that came all the way up the St. Lawrence River. So it's a real issue, not that far in our past, that Canadian ships were being attacked in our own waters, and we needed our Navy to defend them. In fact, the SS Caribou, the ferry between Port aux Basques and then Dominion of the Newfoundland and North Sydney, Nova Scotia, was torpedoed and sunk by German U-boats, killing 136 passengers on board. The last ship sunk was within days of the end of World War II, in sight of Halifax Harbor, which was the HMCS Esquimalt. So very, very close to our distant past, that we need our Navy to be defending ourselves. And how do we do that? Next slide. Well, we have a very large coastline, the longest in the world, in fact. So it's quite a bit of space to cover for the Royal Canadian Navy. And we use our ships on either coast to patrol those coasts and the Arctic. And that presents a few challenges that we'll see on the next slide. And the challenge is that you can see, to move from Halifax to Esquimalt or Victoria, British Columbia, where our two major naval bases are, it takes longer to circumnavigate Canada than it does to cross either ocean. So quite the distance for us to travel and to be responsible for when it comes to our coastlines and territorial waters. And on the next slide, you'll see that operating in the Navy on ships, there's only so much room for us to cover. And that gives you an idea of how we operate within 7 days from our home port and where we can get to. There's a lot of ocean on the West Coast in the Pacific Ocean, and we can't even get to every spot we need in the Arctic within a week. So it requires us to maintain our readiness, have our personnel and our equipment ready to move at short notice so that we can respond when required. And we respond when required to support our economy, among other things, as well as our defense. So we contribute to about 336 billion in the global economy comes through maritime trade. And that is made possible by the Royal Canadian Navy being available and ready to defend our waters, keep our sea lines of communication open, and those essential trade routes to keep goods moving around the world. We see lots of goods come in by ship. And as we've seen in the past few years, whenever there's delays in shipping, that has a serious impact on our supply chains and the cost of goods as they come to Canada. And on the next slide, you see a bit of an image where we talk about how that security at home starts with stability abroad. So making sure that hotspots around the world, shipping channels and different locations are secured so that those goods can continue to move through these essential sea lines of communication so that we have everything we need when we need it. Um, and that effort often goes unnoticed, especially when we think about Canada as a maritime nation and the majority of our people not being able to touch the ocean. But when we're out there operating around the world, of course, we don't do this independently. And on the next slide, you'll see that we operate as part of a team in the international community. So we want to protect Canadian interests, and that obviously those interests align with many of our partners. But the presence of our ships and submarines and sailors around the world uh, is the required influence to help calm tensions and influence the security and stability across the globe. And we work with our allies and partner nations to fulfill our moral and legal obligations, political and treaty obligations, help others improve their security, support an international rules-based order, and as a member of NATO, contribute to collective defense, deterring and preventing conflict around the globe. And we do that by operating every year in many different places, which you'll see on the next slide, where we're active around the globe regularly with ships having a presence often multiple times a year, multiple different ships. So we're active, very active in the global community with our ships and our sailors to ensure that we can accomplish those things. Now, part of that is securing our future, and we see our future as the Arctic. So you'll see up there, Nanook. Well, here's a nice picture from Nanook. So our newest class of ships are the Harry DeWolf class Arctic offshore patrol vessels. They're icebreakers and they operate in the north, and we haven't really done that for many, many years. So the first ship to circumnavigate was the Harry DeWolf, was circumnavigate Canada through the Arctic. We hadn't done that since the 1950s. So new world for us, and I know many of our sailors are very interested in getting a chance to go up north and operate. And I'll say a bit of a proud moment is as a reservist down here in Windsor, Ontario. I was able to visit this ship, Harry DeWolf, when it was in St. John's last month. And I had 7 sailors on board that were from my home unit here in Windsor, Ontario, who had just returned from their operation in Nook. So lots of excited faces and stories to tell. But that's not all we do. And as Robin mentioned earlier, we are also supporting Canadians at home. So like Robin, I've responded to floods and fires. And whenever disaster strikes at home, we prepare our personnel to go help Canadians. And it's one of the better things I think that we get to do is to take care of people in their home communities. And certainly, this was the opportunity during the pandemic when many of us stood up to support our local communities to ensure they had the resources they need and support the planning to respond to the pandemic. So our Navy, on the next slide here, our Navy has approximately 17,000 people. Some of those are sailors in the regular force, some of those are sailors in the reserve force, but often people forget that there's a number of civilians that help make this organization work. And when we talk about our people, although we are all trained and ready to deploy on ships, there's a very large business enterprise that is the Navy that is not on ships at any given time, like myself and Robin, who are prepared to support and maintain our level of readiness. But ultimately, we are part of the business enterprise that allows and enables the ships to go to sea. And so the majority of the people serving in the Navy will be doing tasks like that to help the smaller percentage of people who are on the ships deployed at any time around the world. Next slide, please. So in the Navy, we have a number of locations that you can work. You can work in the West Coast at the base there in Esquimalt. You can work on the East Coast in Halifax. There's also a Naval Reserve headquarters in Quebec City. And of course, in Ottawa, that is where the National Defense headquarters is. And there's a number of Navy personnel that work there. The Naval Reserve has 24 Naval Reserve divisions around the country, pretty much one in every major city in Canada and expanding. And in their 100-year anniversary, I'd be very happy to say that they are the link to communities around Canada, especially those that don't touch the ocean, like you in Toronto. Next slide, please. So here's a great shot of our Atlantic fleet. You can see a number of our ships deployed, sailing. Looks like from a previous fleet week, and all of our sailors lined up on board, about to head out, likely for an exercise. And on the West Coast, on the next slide, you'll see our Maritime Forces Pacific. And you'll see a number of our ships out there with a submarine leading the way, and of course our maritime patrol aircraft up above. A lot more ocean out on this side. On the next slide, you'll see a depiction of what I mentioned with our 24 Naval Reserve divisions, each one of those dots representing a location. And the nice thing about the Navy, if you're full-time and you decide that you want to go back to being part-time, you can transfer to the reserves, attend one of these units depending on where you're living. If you're in the reserves and you're working at one of these units and you decide to move with you and your family for a different job, well, you can transfer to a unit in that location. And it's fairly seamless for you to be able to do those things so that you can continue serving as a member of the Royal Canadian Navy. And I like to throw this next slide in here because it is a bunch of sailors from Toronto, HMCS York in Toronto. And these are reserve sailors, and I've had the pleasure of working with almost all of them. But again, they are their connection to the local communities, but prepared to deploy on operations and travel abroad to support the interests of the Royal Canadian Navy as well. And on our next slide, we have a bit of a snapshot of our ships and what that looks like. So we have 12 Halifax-class frigates. And the top, we have our 6 Harry DeWolf-class Arctic offshore patrol vessels. Currently have 3 in operation, 1 that we'll be receiving shortly, 2 more in the construction phase. So looking forward to having all those online. We also have 12 Kingston-class maritime coastal defense vessels. So there's 6 on either coast, and those are hitting their life expectancy. We're planning to use them for the future. I'm excited to hear that there may be an opportunity to move some of these to the Great Lakes on a more permanent rotation to be supported by reservists, and which means we'd have a much larger presence through the Great Lakes, which is exciting for all of us. There's Victoria-class submarines. We have 4 of those. And we have our auxiliary replenishment vessel that is a leased ship that we're renting, while we're currently building 2 more of those for the Navy here in Canada. The largest ships ever built in Canada, actually. Next slide, please. And you see that our Halifax class, so this is where our Navy is heading. So we are very much going to keep the Halifax class frigates in play for the next foreseeable future. We are working on a project to get 15 new surface combatant ships. We also have our joint support ships, as I mentioned, where we'll have 1 on either coast that are currently being built here in Canada. We have a project for new Canadian patrol submarines, and that'll be either 8 or 12 submarines. And then in the distant future, looking at a replacement plan for those coastal defense vessels. So all that to say, it's a very exciting time to be in the Navy with lots of opportunities to travel and work around the globe, and on some of the newest, in the foreseeable future, some of the newest and most up-to-date equipment in the world in the Navy. Next slide, please. You'll also see that the Navy also works with the Air Force quite closely. So unlike some countries, our maritime aviation does belong to our Air Force, although in our past, it did fall under the Navy at some point. But right now, we have helicopters that deploy on frigates that belong to the Air Force and work together with us to achieve our mission, whether it's surveillance or tracking submarines. We also have our maritime patrol aircraft, and if anyone's following the news, you would have seen a great announcement say that we just signed the deal to move ahead with procurement for, I think, 15 new aircraft. So that's an exciting time for our Air Force. But we can't do the job we do without these two pieces of equipment and the people that go along with it. So that's where everybody comes into play. And I think that brings my slide deck to an end. But thank you for having me, and I get really excited to speak to different people about what we're doing here in the Navy. As mentioned, it's the people that we need to operate these large pieces of equipment, work together in teams in order to have that effect to operate globally to ensure Canada's interests at home and abroad. So thank you so much for having me, and I think we'll pass it over to Robin now.
Good day, everybody. As I previously mentioned, I'm Lieutenant Rob Austin, and I'm going to be basically talking about how you can join the Royal Canadian Navy. Unfortunately, this was supposed to be done by Anders Mech. Anders was unfortunately unable to join us today. So we'll move on to the next slide. So as Lieutenant Commander Elliot already talked about, there's the reasons for the Navy existing is we have combat capable multi-purpose maritime forces. We also support Canada's efforts in security, peacekeeping, humanitarian operations around the world in accordance with the government policy, strong, secure, engaged, which is our current defense policy. We defend Canada's territorial waters as well as our interests at home and abroad, as well as also providing aid to other civilian authorities. Next slide. So in the Canadian Armed Forces and in the Royal Canadian Navy, there's basically two types of employment, as we kind of already alluded to in the earlier part of today's presentation. There is the regular force, which is the larger component of the Canadian Armed Forces, and there's also the reserves. So in the regular force, we are looking at people to commit to working at various lengths of contract lengths. Well, actually not contracts, they're basically committing to working with us for a set period of time. They are normally what we refer to as engagements. The engagements do vary depending on your occupation that you were looking at coming into, as well as also the level of training and whether or not there's any subsidized education involved in it. A variable initial engagement is the one that most people will sign when you join the regular force, and technically it can be as short as 1 year as part of the naval experience program, and as long as 17 years under the regular officer training program if you come in as a pilot. Regardless of your occupation or the element of the military you come into, whether or not it's the Royal Canadian Navy, Royal Canadian Air Force, or the Canadian Army, everyone goes through basic training that is generally conducted at the Canadian Forces Leadership and Recruit School. And then they will concentrate on the environmental training as well as their occupational training. Upon completion of their training, they will then get posted somewhere around the country. So you're not guaranteed employment in the local area when you join the Canadian Armed Forces in the regular force component. You can find yourself being relocated to 17 Wing Comox on Vancouver Island, Northern Region Headquarters up in Yellowknife, or out to 5 Wing in Happy Valley Goose Bay, Labrador. So you do have to be open to moving. Of course, in the Royal Canadian Navy, as we talked about, generally when you join as a sailor, you're going to be sailing out of the West Coast in Victoria, British Columbia, or Esquimalt, to be more specifically, or out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. There is opportunities for subsidized education, because as Juan has already mentioned, we are also a lifelong learning institution. We're always encouraging people to continue on with their education. And you will be continue to upgrade your education as you go through. And we also do have programs that either will subsidize your education, whether or not it's a bachelor's program, a college diploma or certificate, as well as also postgraduate. Next slide. In the reserves, its purpose is basically to augment and support the regular force. There is also opportunities for either short or long-term employment in the local area, as well as also deploying with the Canadian Armed Forces. So in the Royal Canadian Navy, you can find yourself on a short-term contract, sailing on the Harry de Wolf, or on a local base. Or if you decide to join the Canadian Army Reserve, you can also be deployed to the main battle group right now in Poland, or in the Royal Canadian Air Force. A lot of their reserves do work regular shifts working in the maintenance sections of the various different wings and bases across the country. In the reserves, it is basically designed around the academic schedule. So their usual training year starts in September and goes to April. And it's usually a commitment of making working one evening a week, depending on which unit you belong to, and usually 1 to 2 weekends per month. There is also nationally scheduled training, so you can also volunteer to go out for weekend training in order to keep up your military skills as well. So throughout the course of the year, you could find yourself going out to Esquimalt or Halifax, or even to Quebec City to do training along with fellow members of the Naval Reserve. The opportunities are full-time also during the summer in support of Naval Reserve and the Royal Canadian Navy, as well as also other locations. There's no skills required you need to bring to this. Same as the regular force, we're going to provide all the training that's required. And there's approximately about 50 occupations across the Canadian Armed Forces that you can choose from in the reserves, whether or not it's in the Royal Canadian Naval Reserve, the Royal Canadian Air Force, or in the Canadian Army. Like the regular force, there's also an opportunity to help have some of your tuition paid for if you're in university. And we will get up to $2,000 a year for post-secondary education, as well as in some circumstances, we will also guarantee summer employment for set periods of time. With the reserves, you don't actually commit to a variable initial engagement. You don't have a commitment to serve for any particular length of time. Most people will continue to basically have a second career beyond their civilian jobs, well until they hit the compulsory retirement age. Next slide. So there's in the Royal Canadian Navy, as well as also in the regular in the Canadian Armed Forces in general, there are two basic kind of occupation streams that you join up as. There is the non-commissioned members, or NCM, and the commissioned officers. So the non-commissioned members are basically the skilled workers of the military. They also make up the bulk of the Canadian Armed Forces. They are the specialists in their occupations, whether or not it's as a information systems technician, a aviation system technician in the Royal Canadian Air Force, or as a naval combat information operator in the Royal Canadian Navy, whether or not in the reserves or in the regular force. They also work very closely with their associated officers in their occupations, because it is a team environment from which everybody kind of feeds into up the chain, especially in the operations room. Essentially, to join as a non-commissioned member, your basically education is high school or college, and depending on the occupation, there may be specific, either high school or college courses that we're looking for. For example, some may require a grade 12 applied or academic math. Some may require physics at any level. And that's one of the reasons why when you come into the recruiting center, we'll always ask you for, if you have accreditation, we're going to ask you for the comprehensive, just so we can actually equate it. The commissioned officers, we are pretty much the executives or the managers in the occupation. We're supervisory, so you're going to spend a lot of your time as an officer, doing your actual job. For my example, I'm a naval warfare officer, so when I'm not on the bridge, basically making sure I'm in compliance with all the international maritime orders, organized like rules and how mariners operate on the sea, or doing my actual sort of training as a navigator, navigating the ship to where it needs to go to. I spend a lot of my time basically doing human resources, so administering the needs of my non-commissioned members. And of course, we're also looking at future policy and also basically working on directives and basically making sure that what the Navy needs us to do is implemented. For the officers, you do need to have a university degree, especially if you're joining in the regular force. Otherwise, you can also join in the regular force under what we refer to as the regular officer training program, where we will actually pay for you to get a university degree. Or in the reserves, you can also, as long as you're attending a university, you can also enroll as a reserve entry scheme officer, or RESO. Next slide. So right now we do have some priority and threshold occupations. And those are basically occupations that we were really looking for people. That doesn't mean that we're always going to try to encourage you to join us in one of those particular occupations, but we will let you know. And some of those occupations do come with incentives for you to actually kind of look at it. So in-demand occupations, basically we're prioritizing the processing applicants who are interested in these occupations. So if you do have one of those ones, we will normally give you, I wouldn't exactly call it preferential treatment, but you will be contacted and pushed more in order for you to complete your application. Some occupations do have assigning bonuses, and they're offered for specific Canadian Armed Forces occupations, so it's not for all of them. They're generally to skilled and semi-skilled applicants. So applicants that do have specific post-secondary diplomas or certificates that are basically being deemed to be equivalent to the training that would be provided by the Canadian Armed Forces, such as firefighting, the pre-service firefighter courses, or you're already qualified in a civilian occupation, so you already come with most of your Red Seal certifications. Skilled, for the most part, are already people who have service or have previous service in the Canadian Armed Forces. With the signing bonuses, it's not just to kind of answer some questions in advance. It's not you get your signing bonus as soon as you join the Canadian Armed Forces. There are specific milestones that you have to achieve before, and then you will actually then qualify to actually submit for the signing bonus. In some occupations where we do have extra training capacity, we are offering accelerated pay increments. So instead of coming in at the first level base pay for an occupation, you'll actually come in as the next higher level, and then you just be constantly paid for that. And there's a fair amount across the Royal Canadian Navy as well as the Canadian Armed Forces that do qualify for the accelerated pay increment. If you have any questions about what actual pay in the Canadian Armed Forces is, you can actually just go to the Canada.ca website, and it actually has the current pay levels for all members of the Canadian Armed Forces, as well as also the upcoming pay increase that's coming in effect on the 1st of April of 2024. You can also just Google it. It's probably the fastest way of doing it. Next slide. So in the Royal Canadian Navy, there is various amounts of occupations that you can choose from. There is the marine technician, which is, you're basically working on everything from water chillers, reverse osmosis desalinators, so basically making fresh water to power generation, and of course also the movement of the ships, working on GE LM2500 gas turbine engines. Naval communicator, learning how to use both voice as well as data communications between ships and shore establishments or other ships. That also does include semaphore as well as flashing light. So even though it's old, it's still very valuable to learn. Weapons engineering technician. It actually deals with everything from the internal communications on board a ship all the way through to the weapons system. So you could find yourself working on pulling out circuit cards on the ship's integrated communication system, and then a few hours later be uploading the close-in weapon system on the top of the hangar top. Sonar operator, naval combat information operator, so basically radar tracker. Naval electronic sensor operator, basically working in conjunction with the NCIOPS or Naval Combat Information Operator, using other different types of weapon sensors, as well as also electronic jamming. Bosun and port inspection diver is actually a reserve occupation that only exists in the reserves, and you can actually learn how to dive. Otherwise, in the regular force, you can also go for the screening and become a clearance diver. With clearance diving, you learn how to dive with mixed gases, hard helmet diving, as well as also mine countermeasures. It is one that does require additional suction, and it's not one you can actually just generally join off the street from. And of course, the little indicators would locate next to them would actually indicate which ones are in demand, the sign bonus, as well as the accelerated pay increase. All that information is available when you actually go to our website at forces.ca. Next slide. So for officer occupations in the Royal Canadian Navy, there's really essentially three that are kind of the core basis that that we have. There's Marine Systems Engineering Officer. So you're dealing with all the equipment on board that basically makes the ship float, move, and basically generate hotel services, if you want to refer to it as that. So power, and of course motion. Naval Combat Systems Engineering Officer. They deal with making sure the equipment, basically in order for us to get where we need to go to communications wise, as well as also the weapons associated equipment on board. So from communications to the 57mm harpoons and other different jamming equipment. And of course, Naval Warfare Officer, basically naval warfare, as I stumble across talking about my own occupation here, is you basically learn the basic the core skills, first of all, of navigating or operating ships on the high seas, and then you specialize into an area of warfare, whether or not it's communications management, communications information management or information management officers, navigation above water, below water, or in clearance diving officers. So there's a fair amount to the occupation. Naval warfare officers are also the ones that generally, if you achieve the right certifications, will assume command of the ships. Next slide. So in the Royal Canadian Navy, there's also occupations which we refer to as purple. And that just means that these occupations can either wear any of the uniforms of the Canadian Armed Forces, so either the uniform of the Canadian Army as well as the Royal Canadian Air Force, or can also be employed anywhere from basically coast to coast to coast. So there's logistics officers. They are basically trained in the art of human resource management, financial services, supply chain management, music, and the other 9 pillars of logistics. Intelligence, basically working with a team, basically analyzing intelligence and basically working at both the operational and tactical level. Public affairs officers, chaplains, nursing, social worker, training development, making sure that the way we train sailors is actually, the best possible way we can do it. Psychiatrists, physiotherapists, personnel selections officers, they basically deal with, making sure that people are the right fit, as well as, changing people's occupations. Military police officer, health service management, and bioscience. Notice medical officer on there twice. One medical officer, which is the general, will actually, under certain programs, we will hire you as a general, basically family doctor or general practitioner. But there's also medical specialist officers, where if you have a specialty like anesthesiologists, we will actually hire you as a specialist. Bioscience, everyone always loves to talk about bioscience. Ooh, I want to be a bioscience officer. That basically deals with design features in the Canadian Armed Forces. So it is a specialist occupation. We only usually hire about 1 or 2 of those every couple of years. It's not a degree. It's not a program that we hire a lot of, and it's pretty much ergonomics. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. So as we kind of talked about, so purple for the non-commissioned trades in the Royal Canadian Navy. There's financial service administrators, so dealing with pay and benefits as well as budgetary control. Human resource administrators, so dealing with the human resource aspect of all our sailors. Meteorology technicians, so recording and forecasting the weather at sea. This also, goes with the Air Force. So if you happen working in a wing, you'll be providing weather to the pilots, as well as also the Army in the field, collecting weather observations for various different methods. Signals intelligence specialist, so using a lot of high-tech devices in order to basically intercept either data, radar signatures, information. It is one of the occupations that there's not a lot out there, because a lot of the stuff they do is top secret. Cook, so cooking in a galley on a Halifax class frigate in 30-meter waves can always be entertaining for a lot of people, or you can find yourself cooking in a fuel kitchen in the middle of the Rainwright training area. Material management technician, supply management, medical technicians for assisting the healthcare staff, military police, musicians, operating room technicians, intelligence operators, and of course biomedical electronic technologists. Some of the more technological ones, we do actually look to make sure that people have the right skills prior to basically proceeding with it. Some of those ones we do not actually train for, so you do actually have to have the skills available or previously. Next slide. So as a lifelong learning environment, we do have paid education opportunities available for our members. In the regular force component, you can join us under what we call the non-commissioned member subsidized training and education plan, or what we refer to as NCM STEP. And that's when you attend a civilian college or university in a recognized program for basically that relate directly to your future military occupation. So if you're looking at joining the Royal Canadian Navy as a weapons engineering technician, there is actually an associated technology course at Durham College and other different colleges in Southern Ontario that would relate to the occupation. It's the same thing with if you wanted to become a dental technician, there's dental dental assistant level 1 and level 2 courses that also fall under this program. There's also the regular officer training program, or ROTP, and this is where if you do not have a university degree, that we will actually potentially send you to either Royal Military College in either Kingston or Saint Jean, Quebec, or through a recognized Canadian university, other ones, the two that we control, where you'll get a university degree, as well as also a career in the Canadian Armed Forces as an officer. We'll get more into the kind of ins and outs of ROTP in a moment. There's also the Indigenous Leadership Opportunity Year, or ILOI, and this is a one-year preparatory education program that's open to Canadian Indigenous peoples through the Royal Military College of Canada at Kingston. It is 1 year, but you do have the option of continuing on to complete your university degree, so the whole 4 years at RMC, and then of course continue on with the career in the Canadian Armed Forces. There's also other specialty programs, either an undergraduate or graduate programs that are unique to specialized careers in the Canadian Armed Forces. Generally, these are master's programs for things like social work, chaplains, dental, and medical programs. For the dental officer and medical officer programs, we do not pay for your initial degree. We only consider those programs if you've already been accepted into a recognized Canadian medical or dental school. For instance, the dental school at University of Toronto. Next slide. So how does NCM STEP work? Well, it is basically full-time employment while you're at university. So while you're at the college. So while you're at college, we're going to pay you a salary while you're attending your automotive service technician course at Seneca. And we are going to basically cover or reimburse you for your cost of your tuition, your textbooks, and anything else that is required for education. During your summers, we're going to basically train you for your future career in the Canadian Armed Forces. So generally speaking, depending on when you get accepted, you'll go to your basic military qualification or your recruit training, either prior to your start of your first semester or during the summer break. And then you'll return back to your college and you'll continue on. And once you graduate, we will send you on to your occupational training. It does allow applicants or enrollees to kind of get the required knowledge and skills prior to actually engaging in your occupations in their diverse environments. It also does basically provide them a lot of other skills that you may not necessarily get. Now, with the NCM STEP program, like any other subsidized education program, what we ask in return is basically every month of subsidized education, we're going to ask you to basically commit working with us for 2 months. So once you actually complete your program, through service, you will basically pay back your education. For these programs, you do have to be a full-time student, so you can't do it part-time, and it has to be also in-person learning, so you can't do this for distance learning or for online education. NCM STEP is usually only a 2-year program. Most of the college diplomas are 2-year programs. However, there are a few that are sort of 3-year programs that we do subsidize for. Next slide. So as I've already mentioned, you do earn a salary while in school. And as an untrained private, it generally is about 42,400 per year before taxes. And of course, you'll receive that as soon as you start joining. There may be a period of what we refer to as leave without pay before, but as soon as you start in your college education, you will get paid. And of course, you will get pay increases as you graduate. And of course, pay tuition and salary while you're at school. So you come out of it with no student loan, although you do owe us some time back. Next slide. Next slide, one. I'm not sure if it changed over. Okay. So in the Royal Canadian Navy, there are 4 occupations that are available to non-commissioned member subsidized training education program. They are the cook occupation. So you will go to cooking school and you'll learn to cook. There is the medical technician. And that's a paramedic course that you take through the college, marine technician, and weapons engineering tech. Some of these programs do change, so they are generally reflected on our website. But if you have any questions of which occupations are still eligible for NCM STEP, you can always contact the recruiting center. Next slide. So regular officer training program, how does it work? Pretty much like the non-commissioned member subsidized training education program. It is designed to basically provide you with a university degree, as well as also a career in the Canadian Armed Forces. So your degree path that you will choose will lend itself to your future employment. So when you're actually kind of figuring out what you want to do as a degree, you can either do it as kind of 2 methods. You can look at what you want to do in the Canadian Armed Forces and then go to the table and figure out what degrees lend to that occupation. Or if you have an idea of what you want to do in university, then you can also see what that degree will allow you to do in the Canadian Armed Forces. While you're at school, whether or not it's at a Canadian military college or a civilian university, you will, same as the non-commissioned member subsidized training education program, you will receive an annual salary, and you will get pay increases annually. And you also receive the vacation days, just like for the NCM STEP, it doesn't show that during university. During your summers, you will also do military training. So you will go off and do your basic military officer qualification course at the Canadian Forces Leadership and Recruit School in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. You may also do some occupational training or exposure, as well as also second language training. In being an officer in the Canadian Armed Forces, you'll generally be expected to be bilingual, and by a certain point of your career, you will expect it to maintain a level of bilingualism. So as I mentioned at the bottom there, the bilingual proficiency for those who complete training at the Canadian Military College, you had to attain a proficiency in either English, in your second language. So either English or French, you had to attain a certain level. Next slide. So there's an opportunity to obtain an officer's commission through an undergraduate degree. You had to be eligible to study at one of the Canadian Military College. So that's the Royal Military College in Kingston, Ontario, or the Royal Military College in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. You can also go to a approved Canadian university, and depending on certain occupations, such as the health services branches like nursing, we don't actually do those programs at Royal Military College. So you would actually go to a civil university for those. So students who graduate from Royal Military College, they do graduate with an undergraduate degree in either in arts, science, or engineering. With the degree program at Royal Military College, it is actually what we refer to as a 4-pillar degree program. So in order to graduate and to continue on with your military career, you actually have to complete the 4 pillars. The 4 pillars are academics, so you have to complete all the academic requirements. You have to complete what's called the military component, so that's kind of more in the leadership and other training. The third is bilingualism, as we already talked about. You do have to attain a certain level of fluency in either in French or English, depending on which one is not your native tongue. And the last one is physical fitness. You do have to pass these 2 physical fitness tests as you go through. It's called the physical threshold testing, PTT. You have to pass it once before completing your second year, and then you have to pass it again before going for between your third and fourth year. The physical fitness testing there is different than the annual physical fitness testing for the remainder of the Canadian Armed Forces. It does consist of some activities such as a seated medicine ball throw, the Illinois shuttle, the hanging arm grip, as well as also run. Some people, do not successfully complete it, and at the end of the second year, you're usually sent to a different university to complete the degree. Next slide. So Royal Military College Saint-Jean, it is located in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, which is about 20 to 40-minute drive from downtown Montreal on the Richelieu River. It's pretty much like 2 kilometers away from the recruit school. It's a beautiful spot in the river. It is designed to provide a seamless transition from high school to the university. It is generally geared for a lot of people who may have done their high school education in Quebec, and basically to kind of bring them up to the grade 12 level for anyone else in the country, because they have CGIP and various different levels. It is also there for what we refer to as prep year for some applicants who may not have had strong enough marks in some areas, so we will send them to RMCSJ as well. It is random on who actually goes to Royal Military College Saint-Jean. So even though you may be going in engineering or science, which are degree programs only offered at RMC, you may still get selected to do your first and second year at Royal Military College Saint-Jean before switching back to the main campus in Kingston. Next slide. Speaking of which, Royal Military College of Canada, located on Fredericks Point in Kingston, Ontario. It is the larger of the 2 Canadian military colleges. Just like in RMCSJ, it does fully subsidize post-secondary education leading towards university, as well as also the competencies in the Canadian Armed Forces. It does have 20 exceptional undergraduate programs at the school, and it is only about 1,200 students that actually attend there. So your class sizes are very small. It is not uncommon for people in third and fourth year classes to have classes of only 3 or 4 people. Much different than if you go to civilian university. When I went to the University of Alberta, my introduction to behavioral psychology was in an lecture theater that had 950 people. So it is a lot different than a lot of civilian universities. And it also basically sets you up for a exciting career path serving in Canada, as well as also internationally in the Royal Canadian Navy or in the Canadian Armed Forces in general. But you also get that for the Canadian, like for a civilian university as well. Next slide, please. So some of the so the undergraduate degrees that are offered through the Royal Military College of Canada, in the arts faculty, there's the usual ones for business administration, economics, English, French, military and strategic studies, which is maybe not something you see every day at a civilian university, political science, international studies, engineering, aeronautical engineering, chemical, civil, computer, electrical, mechanical. Obviously, for those ones, you will leave with a bachelor's of an engineer or applied science. And of course, for science, chemistry, computer science, mathematics, and physics, and space sciences. For a note there, for some people who may remember Colonel Hatfield, who was recently in space for Canada. He graduated from RMC with a degree in space sciences. He's not Canada's first astronaut. That was actually Commander Mark Garneau of the Royal Canadian Navy. All right. Next slide, please. All right, so we kind of talked about this earlier. So the Naval Experience Program. So as we mentioned before, it is designed to give you exposure to the Royal Canadian Navy. So it's kind of like try it before you buy it if you want to use kind of interesting kind of vernacular. It is there basically to show you what the Navy has to offer, and also to as a kind of side effect the rest of the Canadian Armed Forces, because you will deal with the Air Force on board ship as well as potentially the Army. After 1 year, you can walk away from the Royal Canadian Navy and go do something completely different. Things like, wow, that was fun, but I want to do something else. You can also leave before the year is up, but you can also continue on. because as you get close to the end, we'll ask you what occupation you want to go to, and we'll kind of we'll position you for success in that occupation. As well, if you decide that maybe the Navy is not for you, you can also choose any other occupation in the Canadian Armed Forces, and you can continue on with that path as well. The process, you apply for the Canadian Armed Forces. Just make sure you put down sailor as your occupation choice. There is a streamlined enrollment process for it. Just like anyone else in the Canadian Armed Forces, you are going to do basic training. So you will do the full 8 weeks. Then you'll do naval environment training. All the training you do receive is up to the normal standard for the Canadian Armed Forces. So if you do decide to leave after 1 year, your training is still valid if you decide to come back later time, although there is certain time limits on that. But it is, what you receive for training is what everyone else would normally get. So it's not like you have to go back and do any kind of form of what we refer to as Delta training. What we're also going to give you is basically exposure to a whole bunch of different things. We're going to pay you. So you are going to get the normal salary along with all the benefits and compensation. That includes holidays and vacation time. And of course, hopefully, we're going to give you a sense of adventure and show you a lot of different things in a lot of different places, that a lot of people or a lot of Canadians don't necessarily get the opportunity. We do the program on both East and West Coast. So if you do have a preference, you prefer seeing the cherry blossoms in April in Victoria, vice snow in Halifax, you can choose that. You can also do it in Halifax. It is a continuous enrollment process, so you can apply at any point in time. It's not like there's certain windows that you have to apply for. As we process your application, you will basically start at that point in time. So it's not like it starts every year on the 1st of April. And the program just started out, and we've actually got a lot of interested people. And the first few people should have already been in the fleet, and hopefully seeing, enjoying the process. Next slide. Actually, you can just skip by that. This is a good duplicate. Okay, as we mentioned, you get the same pay and incentives as anyone else does. So you're still going to be making the same amount of money. You would still qualify for the same benefits as well as being as a regular member of the Canadian Armed Forces. You're still a regular member of the Canadian Armed Forces, just you don't have an occupation assigned to you. There is flexibility, as we mentioned. You can exit before the 1 year is over if you don't feel it's the right fit for you. At the end of it, you can carry on in the Royal Canadian Navy, or you can also move to a different occupation. And as you mentioned before, all the training and courses completed, they're applicable for your future service, whether or not it's in the Royal Canadian Navy, in the reserves, or any other component of the regular force or the Canadian Forces. Next slide. So the application process is for anything really, and then for the Canadian Armed Forces, whether or not it's reserve or regular force, you go to forces.ca. That's where everything starts off. So you go into the application, and you go to the website, and where it says apply now, just click on it and start filling out the online application portal. There are some changes coming to it soon. So it may look a little differently come February 2024, but that's where you start out. As you go through, just make sure you put all the required information in it. And then, of course, one of the things that people forget to do is web validate, because it will actually help speed up your process if you do that. We're going to verify all your documentation. So that includes what we refer to as ACE, so age, citizenship, education. And of course, we're going to ask you information for your background in order for us to process your security clearance. You are going to write the Canadian Forces Aptitude and Trait Self-Descriptor, either at the beginning of the process or in some cases now in week 0 of basic training. Security and reliability screening, that kind of goes in hand with the security clearance. We are going to do criminal record checks, background checks on you. Depending on your personal situation, you may also have to provide criminal record name checks for countries that you may have been into recently. There is a medical exam to make sure you meet the common enrollment medical standard, as well as an interview screening process. Once all that is done, we will then move you over to the final stage where we will basically determine what occupation you're going to be, and then you'll receive an offer of enrollment. The whole process can take anywhere between 45 to 90 days, in some cases longer, depending on if you have outside of Canada connections, where it could take up to 2 to 3 years. When you actually provide the documentation, of course, we are going to ask you to bring in originals, and we make our own copies. So in some cases, that it can take a little while while we do it. And as we already had the conversation, we already had a presentation on accreditation. If you've done education outside of the country, we will ask for accreditation through an approved accreditation service, such as University of Toronto, WES, and ICAS. In some circumstances, all we require is the general equivalency. In other cases, we do unfortunately require the comprehensive, where it actually breaks down individual classes towards Canadian standards. And that's, as I mentioned before, depending on your occupation you go into, there is requirements for some occasions for very specific courses. And I think I've covered the majority of information on that. So the basic military qualification course is what some people refer to as basic training or recruit school. It's going to teach you all the core skills and knowledge to succeed in a military environment. It doesn't matter what color uniform you work in, whether or not it's the dark blue of the Royal Canadian Navy, the light blue of the Royal Canadian Air Force, or the green of the Canadian Army. Everyone is taught basically the same common skills at the beginning. You're going to be provided mentorship by people who have a diverse experience and backgrounds. It could be other people who may share very similar sort of life stories as other people who are contemplating joining Canadian Forces. Almost like the degree program, there's also kind of 4 pillars to the basic training. We're basically going over professional conduct, resiliency, physical fitness, and of course other military skills such as map and compass, weapons handling and things like that. You are going to, of course, learn how to march, conduct drills, properly handle a firearm, as well as also apply standard first aid. You do spend a fair amount of time in outside environments, and it sometimes can be austere environments in various different weather and climatic sort of conditions. And of course, there's going to be an opportunity to provide field crafts. So even as a member of the Royal Canadian Navy, when I did my basic training, I learned how to do hoochies and bivouacs and bipods and tripods and different things to operate in an Army environment. And of course, you're also going to be doing a combination classroom. And of course, while you're doing it, you're going to be living with other candidates in your platoon for 8.5 to 9 weeks, while you're at the Canadian Forces Leadership and Recruit School, with your bed, your desk, your locker, your half walls, open concept living, depending on what occupation, you're not non-commissioned member and officer will determine what type of your living arrangements are. And of course, while you're there, you will challenge the confidence course as well as doing the swim test. All right, next slide. So as previously mentioned, the regular force enrollees or to the Canadian Armed Forces, they will complete their basic military qualification or basic military officer qualification at the Canadian Forces Leadership School in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. For members who are joining the Prime Reserve, they all operate slightly differently. So depending on which one you're joining, whether or not it's the Royal Canadian Navy, the Royal Canadian Air Force, or the Canadian Army Primary Reserve, is best to, when you're contacted them, to basically ask about it. The Army does theirs, well, Canadian Army Primary Reserve does theirs modularized. They will also do some summer training, which they do guarantee so many weeks of employment. The Royal Canadian Navy, they do a lot of their training online or at the Naval Reserve divisions across the country. And then there's usually a in-house portion done at a different location. And of course, the Royal Canadian Air Force, if you join the Air Reserve unit that is out at the closest one for Toronto would be 8 Wing Trenton. You are expected to actually go on the regular force course, so you do have to be able to take the 8 weeks off and then, of course, do other training as well. So when it comes to the reserve training, when it comes to the basic training, it's best just to actually when you're talking to the recruiter, just to have them clarify what the expectation is for training. And then of course the occupational training is done more or less the same way. You will be expected to be available for training for certain specific times, whether or not it's modularized or not. But that's that's handled by the various different units themselves. So if you have any questions about the Royal Navy, Royal Canadian Navy reserves here in the Greater Toronto area, of course there's HMCS York down on Lakeshore Boulevard. If you have me living a little more on the west side, of course there is also Star in Hamilton as well. Next slide. So for basic military qualification, the current timelines, when you go for week 0, there is an introduction. There's what we refer to as onboarding. So it's a lot of paperwork. In the future, it may also be, for some occupations, we will also be writing the aptitude test at that time as well. Week 1, 2, and 3 kind of goes more into the actual kind of military life dress department physical aid certification. Usually those first 3 weeks, there's a fair amount of focus on physical fitness. It's usually referred to as the indoctrination phase. And then after that, it kind of the life kind of training balance kind of settles out. And then week 4, there's a lot of weapons handling, physical fitness in week 5. And that's when you actually will do the annual physical fitness test for the Canadian Armed Forces. There's the week 7 and 8 is more for the more training. That's generally involved in the training area, which is just to the east of the recruit school. And then, of course, upon completion of all your training, you then graduate from the recruit school, and then you either head off to the training establishment where you go in your training, or directly, or there could be an opportunity for holiday time between. And next slide. So some obvious perks of and benefits from joining the Canadian Armed Forces. There is over 100 occupations for you to choose from, both in the regular force and the reserves, some specific to the Navy, as well as also some specific to the Army and the Air Force. We do offer a competitive salary for a lot of people. There is job security, as we are basically going to commit to working with you for a set time period. And then after that, you can also continue to work with us beyond. We do offer valuable training, especially in some people in the specialty occupations. You will leave the Canadian Armed Forces with your respective apprenticeship or civilian certifications when you leave. So you can just, kind of roll into a civilian career once you're done. We do offer full dental and medical coverage for yourself, and there is also the opportunity for family and dependents to be also receive additional coverage under the public service health care plan, PHCP. There's maternity and dental benefits. There's, of course, the pension plan. You do qualify for your pension after 10 years of service. You do qualify for your full pension after 25 years of service. Of course, you start paying into that the moment you join. If you leave before you qualify, your contributions get returned to you. When you first start off, you're going to get 20 paid vacation days. That does not include stat holidays and other sort of special days that we do throw into the schedule. After 5 years of service, you get 25 days, and after 28 years, you get 30 days of annual days. Keep in mind, especially in the Royal Canadian Navy, you may not necessarily always get to take your vacation days when you want to. It comes down to sailing schedules and availability. So sometimes, you may deploy over the holidays, you may deploy during the summer. It depends on what the needs of the ship are. Of course, there's also professional development. As we talked about, as a life learning agency, always pushing people to progress their education, whether or not that's at the post-secondary or postgraduate levels, or also in other different sort of qualifications. Career advancements, subsidized education, second language training, diverse employment locations throughout, and of course, environments from the coast to coast to coast. So you could be working in Yellowknife for a period of time. You could be down in Toronto. You could be like my former commanding officer, who's in Italy right now for 5 years. So there is also kind of leads into the bullet that I kind of passed over. There is definitely travel in the Royal Canadian Navy. I can much guarantee anybody for that, because in order to get qualified in your occupation, you got to go to sea, and the ships are in some pretty nice locations right now, or some interesting spots. Adventure and challenge. You also do get cultural training. There's religious accommodations as well for both vacation days and dress, deportment. Employment equity is also advisory groups. All right, next slide. I think that concludes it. Oh. Yeah, so if you have any questions before I pass it back to Juan, you can contact the Canadian Forces through the website, forces.ca. You can click on a recruiting center closest to you, whether or not that's, of course, Toronto, that's located at 4900 Yonge Street in North York, Ontario. If you're out here in this area of the GTA, of course, there's Oshawa. We're out here in 200 John Street. There's also the recruiting center in Hamilton, and of course, London, Ontario. There's also all the other ones across the country. If you're looking specifically into the Navy, you can also on a part-time basis, or even for the Naval Experience Program, you can contact HMCS York. As I mentioned before, they're down on Lakeshore Boulevard, down in downtown Toronto. If you don't live close to them, you can also go to STAR or Prevo in London, or as the Sir, he's down in Windsor. Out here in Durham, not quite so much. It's either Toronto or Kingston. But you can contact them at the information. Their websites and telephone information, as along with every other primary reserve unit, and of course regular force recruiting center is located at the forces.ca website. You just got to go to contact us, and the contact information is all there. Anyways, thank you for listening to my presentation, and I'm gonna pass it back to Juan.
Thank you, Robin. Very, very, very illustrative, and thank you for spending time with us explaining the full range of occupations and how lifelong learning actually happens, and not only in the Royal Canadian Navy but also in the Canadian Armed Forces. We have a few questions here that I will be moderating for not only for Chris and Robin. I also got here one question for Peggy, and perhaps we can start with that one. What kind of support does CES offers to international educated professionals coming from regions at war, social unrest, recognizing that those applicants might be in a very different situation than a newcomer coming from a country that is not experienced that type of circumstances? Can you speak a bit about that, Peggy?
Certainly, thanks, Juan. So at CES, we have established an alternative credential assessment procedure. That procedure is based on the Pan-Canadian Quality Assurance Framework for International Educational Credentials. This alternative procedure really takes into consideration of the situations that the applicants are coming from. So in most cases, we've seen refugees or refugee claimants, or someone from a country that is currently in a war. They have limited documentation or even no documentation. When we are evaluating those credentials, we look at holistically what their education has composed of. And we usually ask for their own documents and to see whether there's anything they have in their possession. And we go from there. Usually we'll invite them to bring their original documents with them. And one of our assessment members will be able to review and determine whether that original documents meet our requirements. We do have a large in-house database with sample documents from pretty much most of the countries. I wouldn't boast it's all countries, but most of the countries that we normally see our immigrants are from. We also have connections with the community of educational evaluation companies, agencies, and evaluators, and even university admissions offices. And part of that is really try to establish a story that can convince us that this person has a potential. We also use online resources to see whether we can find if someone has a master and above degrees. Usually we'll look to see whether they have published articles especially for PhDs. For undergraduate students, mostly going to be really that process of trying to understand what they have in their position. We have had experiences using applicants' bank statement confirming their tuition fee paid, and also student ID as peripheral. All of this really we're trying to establish a case that this person has actually gone through the program and has obtained their degree. We also utilize something called European Qualification Passport for refugees. This is a very specific document that are usually for people who first went to Europe, and then they have gained that from one of the ministries that ministries of education that participated into this program. And Canada has, in principle, agreed to accept that as part of the assessment process, so that we will actually take that as the initial step to say this person has already completed such level of education. And then we apply our policy to, remember, there are three elements: authenticity, recognition, and equivalency. We will actually provide an equivalency based on that particular documents. We have also had we're very fortunate we have not really have to rely on that method, is the interview based, which means the applicant really has probably no documentation. Then we will utilize the interview method. Basically, it will be a series of questions. Usually we'll seek professional support from our faculty members as well. It's like an oral exam, but at a shorter time frame. But mostly we'll actually ask them, who was your professor at the time, who you remember as your classmates. These are all peripheral evidence that we use to confirm the education.
Thank you, Peggy. Very, very informative, especially because there are so many regions at this moment experience conflict, and Canada is receiving an influx of refugees from many of these regions. It is important to know that how CES operates in those cases. So thank you. Questions about the Royal Canadian Navy for Chris and Robin. Why did you choose to work for the Royal Canadian Navy? And perhaps Chris can start to give Robin a longer pause. He has been speaking for over 40 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. So I joined the Royal Canadian Navy as when I was 19 years old, and I did so kind of seeking some adventure and challenge, and there was a bit of a patriotic aspect of service to my country. But one of the big sells was I was trying to attend university, and I needed to figure out a way to pay for that. And so offering the part-time job with almost guaranteed full-time employment in the summers, that seemed like a great opportunity for me to be able to do that. Before I joined the Navy, I had been on an airplane one time in my life. And, since then I've been all over the world. So, it was certainly a call to adventure, a call to serve my country, and an opportunity for me to pay for my education. Thanks, Juan.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. What about you, Robin?
So kind of the same story. I joined at a high school at 17. I actually joined before my 18th birthday. My family had previously served in various components of the British military, mainly artillery. So it was kind of a shock for them for me to join the Canadian Air Force at the time, because I actually started off in the Air Reserve as an admin clerk, because I thought it was a good way to learn how to type back in '89 on a computer in order to do my papers get my bachelor's of arts in history, but also the same thing for the purpose of serving, pride in the country, and for doing my and also full-time employment. During my education, I did take time off to actually do other different things, paid for the reserves, which kind of, reason why it took me forever to get my BA done. But I almost actually deployed for Operation Friction back in the Gulf War Part 1, and then I wasn't quite done my university degree when I changed over to the Navy Reserve, and I probably would have left the military a lot longer, but I I went to deploy on a ship, and I went down to South America, to Chile, and various different locations, and actually kind of getting that exposure was kind of the big hook. When I got back, and I basically, because as I completed my university degree, at my Naval Reserve Division at Edmonton, I reclassified to become an officer, and I did my training as a bridge watchkeeper in the reserves, and then I switched over to the regular force. And then since I've come back to the reserves, so a lot of it was basically that exposure of seeing the Navy, and of course the Navy's changed a lot since then, since the early '90s. But that's, I kind of fell into the Navy, and I'm kind of glad I did.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Robin. And thank you for sharing once again, Chris. Question here, between sailing schedules, missions, deployment, how does family look like for members of Royal Canadian Navy? I mean, thinking about your spouses, your kids, family members, like, how does that look like? If you can paint a picture here.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. Certainly, I won't sugarcoat it. At times, it can be challenging. When you are away on ships deployed at sea, there's not always connectivity, although it's something that we've taken steps to improve on over the years to make sure that people can connect with their loved ones back home. When you do deploy, usually you'll be based out of either coast and your family will be living there with you, which means they'll have plenty of access to resources like the Military Family Resource Center, which really tries to help build a community around those families in that area so that they can have a support system while people are away. And so between the support systems and between the ability to communicate, I'd say we're doing much better than we used to. But certainly at those deployment times, in the rotation of those deployment times, which again is not meant to be every year for all year, right? It's just a period of time as you rotate through a ship. Those can be some of the more challenging times. So we really rely on those communities we build in those areas. So, Robin, if there's anything you can add to that, I'm sure you've gone through that yourself.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I'd like to. There are definitely going to be some occasions where, unfortunately, the family life kind of takes the back seat of your career. But as Lieutenant Commander Elliot was saying, there is definitely supports for both you and your family for the Canadian Wildland Welfare Service. The military does have a motto, missions first, but families always. And over the years, that definitely has become more of a focus. Just because you may be on ship, the rotation is definitely changed a lot. So if you do deploy for a 5 to 6 month period, generally you're protected for a period of time. And generally you're also going to have your family co-located with you. The days of like when I started doing my career where my ship would come alongside and I'd look forward to a couple of weeks of holidays would quickly be thwarted by me throwing everything I owned into a kit bag and then sailing back out for another 4 or 5 month period, or luckily are behind us for the most part. But no, there will be some challenging days ahead of you, just like with most occupations, but there are definitely sort of a lot more connections when you're there, because when you do deploy on a Canadian Navy ship, you do have the opportunity to use the satellite phone to call home. You're given so many minutes that account is renewed every 7 days, so you can always just sign up and use it. You do have access to your email. The ships have kind of turned themselves into a virtual floating hotspot, so you have your email, you have the internet, you generally have satellite TV. Unfortunately, there are occasions when we do have to kind of suspend those communications, but you're definitely a lot more connected back home with your family than when I joined, where the TV was whatever you could get on the antenna, whatever language it may be in. Your phone basically consisted of whatever payphone you could find when you came alongside, and internet, no, you weren't getting it. But then again, those were the ships that were designed in the 50s, and of course that's the 90s technology there. But yeah, there is definitely there'll be some challenging days, but the life balance is there and it is improving.
That is great to know. Thank you, Robin. This I think this will go back to you, Robin. When you were talking about the 4 pillars of ROTP. You mentioned bilingualism, and you were talking about like that people need to develop proficiency in a secondary language other than their native language. But what if their native language is not English or French? If you are having like individuals from other countries that they don't have those languages as native language. So what is the actual requirement that they need to meet?
Okay, so to become a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, when it comes to language ability, you have to be able to be fluent in either English or French, one of the official languages of the country. Whether or not that's the second or fourth or fifth language from wherever you're coming from, but you have to be able to be functional in English or French. If there's an issue of ability, we will do like we refer to as threshold language testing to make sure that you are going to understand, what we're going to show you at training. When it comes to ROTP, just because, based on the official language act, it's either French or English, you have to become fluent in whichever one it is that you're not, declaring as your primary language. So if you declare English as your primary language, even though it may not be your first language, then you have to become bilingual in French or vice versa. And if you are fluent in other languages, we will also test you for those, just because the fact that in the future, for example, if you speak Spanish, we may need you for some for operations in and around the Caribbean, or also like with Op Calumet in the Sinai. So if you speak Farsi, that's another positive. But you have to be you had to be functional in English or French.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This question is for either of you, Chris or Robin, and it's about retirement, life after your service. After you retire, or if you need to leave due to an injury, for instance, what is the type of support that you receive from the forces or the Royal Canadian Navy?
Yeah, thanks, Juan. It's a very important question. So one of the things that we've implemented over the last, I guess, almost decade, is that we have Canadian Armed Forces transition groups kind of spread around the country, co-located with our major bases. And those transition groups are there to post people to allow them a transition process out of the forces for whatever reason that they're leaving. And we do have a standard that we're trying to achieve, is like to make sure that everybody has everything they need to set up for whether they upskill or reskill for civilian employment or transition into a lifestyle, whether it's an injury or disability or something like that, but allowing them to access those resources. There's a number of programs out there that are looking to offer, whether it's free education in terms of reskilling or upskilling, through Veterans Affairs. Depending how much time you have, 8 or 12 years of pensionable service, you can access between $50,000 and $90,000 towards education upon retirement as well. And those are the types of programs that we bring people to the transition group. We make sure all the medical needs are met, all their kind of reskilling transition needs are met, turn them over to their civilian counterparts, and then their file really, once they retire, becomes a Veterans Affairs types file. So we'll transition that and make sure they have all the contacts they need. So obviously people leave the forces for many different reasons. If you're leaving with a full pension at the end of your career, 25 years to full pension, you're immediately annuitant, and you still have access to a number of those services to be able to transition to a new life. Because if you started like Robin or myself, you could be in your mid-40s with a full pension, retiring and looking to start a new career. So lots of opportunity available.
Excellent. Thank you. Great to know, Chris. Robin, when we were talking about a timeline for the hiring process, and you mentioned a bit of this, but when you were talking about the duration of that, when you were speaking, I believe this was when you were talking about the Naval Experience Program. You refer that if the person has lived outside Canada, it might take a bit longer. And you drop a number in there. You said something along the lines of 2 to 3 years. Did I capture that properly? And if that is the case, like, what is the reason for such a long time?
Okay. Yeah. So in some cases, the security clearance process can take a protracted period of time. What we do when anyone comes to apply for the Canadian Armed Forces in the regular force component, whether or not it's under the Naval Experience Program or any other entry programs, is we actually ask people what their connections are to outside Canada, whether or not they themselves are Canadian citizens, if they're permanent residents, which you can join as permanent resident, whether or not you have dual citizenship, if you have financial assets outside the country, family residence, and as also how long you've been living in the country. Based on that information, depending on where you've resided before coming to the country and how long you were there, may require additional screening prior to joining the Canadian Forces. So basically, what happens is instead of processing you for a security clearance by the government of Canada after joining, we basically front load that process. So for some people, it may be a momentary delay because we determine that you've lived your life in Montego Bay, Jamaica. You came to Canada before 5 months ago. You don't really have any other connections down into Jamaica. It would be if we may bypass that process. But if you come from China or you've lived in another country and you're basically, depending on how long you've been in the country for, we may, that may trigger the basically us doing your background reference check, your credit check in advance. Some countries, unfortunately, we don't have an agreement with, so it can take long periods of time for the analysts in Ottawa to get that information. Unfortunately, we don't have an agreement in place with Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada because they do a lot of that as in advance. That's something we're working on. But in some extreme cases, it could potentially take up to 2 years as we process you for a higher level of security clearance.
That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for that. We're almost at the top of the hour. We might have time for perhaps one more question. I am concerned about the level of my physical fitness and that it is not at the level required to work for the RCN. What are your thoughts about that? And perhaps this question is mostly asking what does it entail? The physical fitness test.
Well, I just want to say, Juan, I think you're in great shape, but
appreciate it.
So the standard for your average applicant, barring the ones that Rob talked about, like the clearance divers and certain trades that would have a higher level threshold, everybody's going to complete the common fitness assessment, which is called the force test. So you can search that up on Google, force test, Canadian Armed Forces, and there'll be lots of instructional videos. But essentially, it consists of 4 common task components. One being 20-meter rushes, where you're going to essentially run 10 meters, drop down, get up, run another 10 meters, and you'll go back and forth twice for a total of 80 meters. And you have it's a time component, so 51 seconds to do that. The second component of that is a sandbag lift. So imagine you're lifting boxes. You're going to have 3 minutes and 30 seconds to do 30 lifts with about a 45-pound sandbag, if I'm remembering correctly. Mine's due in a couple of months, so I'll be back on that. And so that's the second one. So just your common lifting task, you'll do that for 30 reps. The time limit is 3 minutes and 30 seconds. But some people, if you want to kind of aim towards a higher standard, you'll try to do it as fast as you can. So there's different incentive levels. But as long as you're in the timing, there's no issue. The third one is a loaded and unloaded shuttle. So imagine carrying that same sandbag, 20 meters and back. You do that 5 times, and you do that loaded 5 times, and you do it unloaded 5 times. So you'll then jog around that cone and back. And that has 5 minutes and 21 seconds, I believe. And so that gives you plenty of time. I've seen people walk that very slowly and meet that standard. So that one's not much of a concern for most. And then the final task is is simulating a casualty evacuation. So you're going to drag about 200 pounds of sandbags on the floor while holding one of those sandbags in your arms. And there's no time limit as long as you continually make progress towards. And it's just one pull for 20 meters to simulate you being able to pick somebody up and carry them out of a rough situation. So again, no time limit on that. So it's just those 4 common tasks. We used to have a different test. People are more successful at the current test than they were at the old test. It does become a challenge for some people who maybe are a bit shorter or don't have the leverage for certain tasks, but that can all be trained. So if you look at the website, there's also a dfit.ca website that talks more specifically about that. You can go in there and they'll give you some recommendations for exercises that'll help you be successful at those tasks.
That's great. I think based on that description, I think I could make it. Yes, Robin.
Sorry, I was also going to add that if you're concerned about your level of fitness, you can also contact a Canadian Forces recruiting attachment, and they can give you a suggested 12-week fitness program to get you in shape for it. There's also, if you're looking at also joining one of the combat arms occupations, so infantry, combat engineer, armored, those ones, there is a slight variation on the force test, which I'm not going to elaborate on because we're here to talk about the Navy.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Okay, we are at the top of the hour, and I would like to say really thank you, everyone, for joining this webinar. Thank you, Peggy and Chris and Robin, for joining us and do this very useful presentation about career pathways in the Navy. Is a really exciting opportunity, and I encourage our attendees to search more and to ask questions. And to ask questions, I will leave you with that slide that have a couple of email addresses that you can access in order to get more information. And with that, have a wonderful rest of the day. Chris and Robin, thank you once again for joining us today, and thank you for your service. And have a wonderful rest of the day and weekend.
Thank you, Juan. Thanks, School Continuing Studies team. Always appreciate your support. Thanks again.